Our first speaker, Josh McKoon.
Well, thank you very much, Sherry. I appreciate it. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. In the back? It's a pleasure to be in Columbus. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. I do want to say a couple of thank yous. I could really go around and say something about just about everyone in this room. But I do want to be sure to recognize the members of our executive committee. I think I saw Jenny Ekman earlier. Is Jenny here? Oh, okay. Jenny is our assistant treasurer. She's been doing a fabulous job. And it's great to have some additional representation from this part of the state on the executive committee. And then, of course, Katie's done an amazing job as 3rd District Chairman. Thank you so much, Katie. We really have a very good team for the most part on the executive committee. We've really worked well together. We've had a successful election, which I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about the election we concluded in November. And again, I'm not going to go around the room and talk about every single person here, but seeing Kevin and Linda and UD, I mean, people that just, when I was chairman, were involved 16 years ago. I just appreciate so much the faithful service and everything y'all have done to build and keep this Republican Party, and Sherry and your team as well. And the last person I want to say just a quick word about, Paul Voorhees. Paul has been on this journey really with me this entire time. I'm going to probably talk a little bit more about it as I go through the election, but Paul and I went down on December 18th, 2023 to Mar-a-Lago and met with President Trump. It was supposed to be a 30-minute meeting. It wound up being 2 hours and 45 minutes. And our congressman had a lot to do, Congressman Brian Jack had a lot to do with putting that meeting together. But Paul has been with me at the RNC meetings. He has been so supportive of the chairmanship for the last year and a half, as well as our state party, and I'm just very much in debt to you, Paul. Thank you very much. So I really just want to talk about two big items tonight. The first one is sort of where we've come to since June of 2023 when we had the state convention here in Columbus, and I was privileged to be elected your state chairman, and kind of carry us through the election in November. So if you think about June of 2023, we certainly weren't sure who our nominee was going to be. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be President Trump. But we had a lot of people that were jockeying and getting in the race. I got elected in June. On August the 14th, 3 of our presidential electors were indicted by Fani Willis in Fulton County. And the executive committee, before I came on board, had said we were going to indemnify and defend those electors. So the two big tasks that I set out for the Georgia Republican Party were to make sure that we carried Georgia for the Republican nominee for president, and that we ended this fake, phony witch hunt that was attacking the very foundations of our nation. And so we accomplished goal number 1. We elected Donald Trump here in Georgia. And I would say, if the Fani Willis witch hunt was the Rocky movie, we're in like the last 10 minutes, right? I mean, we know the Russians going down. It's about to happen. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But I want to start with the election. This was an election that was incredibly important for the future of our country. It's hard for me to believe what we lived through 2021 up until just a couple of weeks ago. A lot of y'all know I have a 13-year-old stepson, Jackson. He was in the 3rd grade in public school in Atlanta when the 2 weeks to stop the spread were announced. And for him, that wound up being the rest of his 3rd grade year, his entire 4th grade year, 5th grade, they had people wearing masks in school except when they were sitting shoulder to shoulder in the cafeteria to eat. But we wound up making some decisions as a family to put him in a different environment, to get a reset, to get him caught up academically, to get our son back. And, that all happened because of decisions made by bureaucrats and made by people that just don't think the way you and I think. And this election that we had in November, in my opinion, more so than any election I've ever been involved in, was really about the soul of this nation and which direction were we going to go in. Were we going to finally try to break free of this cycle of ever more government control, telling you how to live your life, apologizing for America, sort of accepting American decline? That's really what the Biden administration symbolized, in my opinion. You had a president that had difficulty completing sentences, remembering where he was, wouldn't speak to important issues. I mean, just think about since January 20th, how ever present the President of the United States has been and how forceful he has communicated America's position on the world stage. It's jarring. I mean, it's a positive thing, but it's jarring how big of a difference that was. So we knew when we started here how important it was going to be to win Georgia. When we had the certification of the 2020 election, that was an 11,000 vote margin between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I want you to know something about that margin that I don't think is very well known. Donald Trump won election day voting in Georgia in 2020. Donald Trump won in-person early voting in 2020 in Georgia. Donald Trump lost absentee ballots in Georgia by hundreds of thousands of votes. And that was the difference in the election. So we got to work on a couple of different fronts. I'm going to start off by talking about election integrity because it was important to us for two reasons. Number one, we want the best process possible, right? We want our elections to be as fair as they possibly can be, as error-free as they possibly can be. Any human endeavor, there are going to be mistakes, there are going to be things that happen, but we want to minimize that window as much as we possibly could. And so we got some important bills passed to improve that process, both with in terms of challenging to try to clean up our voter rolls, a lot of things that we were able to get done in the 2024 legislative session. One of the things that didn't get talked about a lot is we changed the law on presidential ballot access. In most presidential elections in Georgia, you have a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian. Now that puts us on fundamentally unequal ground because Libertarians tend to appeal to the same voters that Republicans appeal to. And so we said, well, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? Why shouldn't there be a left-wing party on the ballot, a minor left-wing party on the ballot? And when all was said and done, because of our legislative changes, Jill Stein was on the ballot in Georgia, and there were petition efforts that got Claudia De La Cruz and Cornel West on the ballot. Now, why am I talking to you about that? The margin of this race was 115,000 votes. Between Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Claudia De La Cruz, they received 40,000 votes in this election, over a third of the margin. And those are votes that are going to Kamala Harris if those options aren't on the table. And that was directly the result of the work being done by the Election Confidence Task Force, by me as your chairman. And that's important. That's why we have to be smart and strategic when we think about this elections process. Now look, Chairman Whatley at the RNC, he made it clear to me early on, he wanted to see an unprecedented effort on election integrity in our state. That's why we had more attorneys, more volunteer and retained counsel than we've ever had in Georgia Republican Party history. Over 500 lawyers that were engaged in our election integrity effort statewide. We had the most poll watchers recruited in Georgia history. Many counties had full coverage for the entire 3 weeks of early voting and Election Day. We had eyes on the process, which was hugely important for two reasons. One, we want a fair election, but the other thing is, remember, a lot of people after 2020, there was a public confidence problem with a lot of our voters about why should I go vote anyway? I don't feel like my vote's going to matter. So it was important for us in a very public way to send the message, this election will be a fair election. If you turn out and vote, this is a center-right state, we're going to win the election. The other thing we did is we spent a lot of time in courtrooms. We filed or intervened in more lawsuits than the Georgia Republican Party has ever done in an election cycle. And, you know, I wish we didn't have to do that, but the left set us all down this road. We have to defend the laws the legislature passed. Senate Bill 202, which was passed after the 2020 election, among other things, it said you have to have a wet signature on an absentee ballot application to get an absentee ballot. Not just get on a computer and hit a button and generate absentee ballot requests. The AJC has a story I'll be happy to send around to all of y'all. And the headline is, 374,000 voters vanish in 2024 election. You know, and they're mystified that this happened. That's because we tightened the law on how people get absentee ballots. We eliminated a lot of funny business that was going on. And we went to court, defended Senate Bill 202. We won. We won the overwhelming majority of these cases that were brought by lawyers like Mark Elias to try to weaken Georgia election integrity law. But the other thing we did is we responded very quickly when things happened in the field. Friday, November 1st, that night, I found out that Fulton County, Chatham County, Gwinnett County, and other counties, with no notice, were going to open their elections offices on that Saturday and Sunday to take in absentee ballots. Why? Because they saw the same early voting data I did, indicating that we were bringing people out in droves. We were overwhelming the Democrats, and their last gasp was to try to push as many of the available absentee ballots back into these offices. I found that out at 6:30 p.m. on Friday night. By 8:30 p.m. we had a lawsuit filed. 8 o'clock the next morning, Saturday morning, we had a hearing in front of a judge. Now the judge did not agree with us. The judge did not agree with us. We were not able to shut the doors. Fulton County sent out an email saying we couldn't have our poll watchers in their buildings while this was going on. So I got on the phone. I called Chairman Whatley. I called Laura Trump. They started pushing the news about this, and within 45 minutes, the Fulton County Elections Office said, oh, it's a big mistake. Anybody that wants to can come in and see what's happening. And what wound up happening is very few people actually took advantage of it because they knew we had eyes on the process. We were looking for any irregularities. And that's what you have to do. You have to be aggressive in the election integrity game. And I will tell y'all, on Election Day, we were litigating issues. 10:30 at night, DeKalb County was trying to open up additional precincts. Chairman Michael Whatley, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, is on the phone with me at 10:30 in our war room with our legal team, making sure that we didn't allow them to pull a fast one in the waning hours of this election. And in an election that was decided by 2% of the vote, it's incredibly important. So election integrity was key. But let's talk about the campaign side for just a minute. We went to our voters and said, we need you to go vote early. And I can tell you, the first 50 times I gave that talk, somebody in the crowd would boo or throw something at me. They're like, don't vote early because then they're going to know and they're going to be able to do this and that. You might not like early voting, but you got to play by the rules of the game that you've got. And the rules of the game we have were 3 weeks of early voting. So the first week of early voting, we had 200,000 people vote that did not vote in 2020. Now the whole strategy, Turning Point, Greater Georgia, Trump Force 47, Georgia Republican Party, was we need to go get these low propensity voters who we know are with us, but get them to go vote. And those people have to be touched over and over and over again. And many of the people in this room made the phone calls and knocked on the doors and made sure that happened. But I want you to know something. By the end of early voting, 20% of the people that voted early in the state of Georgia, over 800,000 people, did not vote in the 2020 election. That's because of your efforts. It's because we executed on a strategy that we knew would work. The other part of this campaign that was so important was that we did realize we can't do everything. The Georgia Republican Party hired out the field staff. If you dealt with a Trump Force 47 staffer, they were a Georgia Republican Party employee. If you were in a Trump Force 47 office, that was an office we leased. So we did a lot to turn out the vote. But it wasn't just us. You know, I thank God for Charlie Kirk and Turning Point Action. Because they have made an investment in Georgia. And they did not pack up in November. They're still here. They're still working because they know what we're going to be facing and what I'm going to talk about in a minute about 2026. But we worked as a team for the first time ever. It wasn't the Georgia Republican Party versus the world and the Democrats having all these other third-party groups. It was like finally having a football game where both teams have 11 players on the field, you know. And so Greater Georgia, Tea Party Patriots, Turning Point Action, Faith and Freedom Coalition, we had this great group of patriots working in their zones to make sure we had everything covered that we needed covered in this election. And that focus on low propensity voters and measuring, not saying to Travis, here's 1,000 people, just I want you to give me a document back with check marks that you've at least left messages with these people. It was, Travis, here are 10 people that we desperately need to go turn out and vote. Have a quality conversation with those people, then we're going to take the next 10, then we're going to take the next 10. And the media in Atlanta, they were calling me and saying, why don't you have more field offices? Why don't you have more staff? Why aren't you contacting these other people? And they were laughing at us until November 5th. And then we got the last laugh. So the other thing I want to talk for just a moment about, and nobody likes to talk about this or to do it, but it is incredibly important, and that is fundraising. You cannot have a successful political movement if you cannot raise money. And the Georgia Republican Party was facing serious financial challenges because while we were having to run a presidential campaign, we were also having to run a sort of small criminal defense law firm on behalf of our 3 presidential electors who needed to be indemnified and who should not have been financially destroyed because of a partisan prosecutor that cares more about her political profile than her state or her country. So we went to work. We found creative ways to raise money, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but one story I do want to tell y'all. Presidential candidate qualifying. The State Executive Committee does that. We are barred, unlike some of our friends in other states, from charging a qualifying fee. So for example, in South Carolina, they were charging people, they were saying, you can run for president. Where's your check for $50,000? That's what they were doing in South Carolina. So what we decided to do in Georgia is we encouraged the candidates, we said as a test of your financial viability and the test of the viability of your campaign, write a $25,000 contribution to the Georgia Republican Party. And I'm proud to tell you that within 24 hours of us posting that criteria, Donald J. Trump for president sent us $25,000. And as a result of that, we had 8 additional candidates follow suit. We raised $225,000 for the Georgia Republican Party. We raised over $2 million through the events we put together, some very creative partnerships. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ultra-right beer, the sort of conservative beer. But the founder of ultra-right beer and I got together, and he said, look, I'm going to put out a special edition beer. I'm going to take the Donald Trump Fulton County mugshot and put it on a can of beer, and we're going to donate a percentage of those sales to the Georgia Republican Party. It raised us $50,000. So, and we keep looking for creative ways. You're going to have an opportunity in a couple of days to purchase limited edition Gulf of America t-shirts that the Georgia Republican Party is putting out. But we're looking for fun ways, for interesting ways. We had a lot of great events. Senator J.D. Vance, I wanted J.D. Vance to come to Georgia long before he was identified as our vice presidential nominee. He came and spoke to us about a year ago. We had Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. We've had some great events. We raised the money we needed to raise to do the job. So that's sort of what's happened. So let's talk about moving forward. I was in Columbus earlier today. We had a death in our family. We had a funeral this afternoon. And you think about, I'm going to be 46 years old later this month. You think about, probably have more years behind you than ahead of you. What are you going to do to make a difference? And I feel like 2024, we made a huge difference together as a team in the future of this country. But the job is not over. We have 53 United States senators that are Republican. 53 United States senators that say they are Republican. We need more. The best opportunity to get a 54th Republican United States senator is right here next year. Yes. John Ossoff is perhaps the most unqualified person to ever walk into the United States Senate. Now, I gave this talk a couple of years ago when I was first running for chairman, and I would talk a lot about Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania, and I feel like I owe him an apology. But John Ossoff, every time now, he voted against providing critically needed defense systems to Israel in December. Now when Israel votes come up, he just gets sick and doesn't show up and votes at all. So, he's a savvy politician. He's a chameleon. He's going to play a lot of games. And so we've got to have our A-team to make sure we put a Republican in the United States Senate from Georgia. The other thing we got to do, we have a lot of offices that are going to be open next year. Governor Kemp is term limited. A lot of us expect Lieutenant Governor Jones is going to run for governor. A lot of us expect Brad Raffensperger will be doing something else. Attorney General Chris Carr has said he's running for governor. So we're going to have all these vacant seats. And those of you that have been around a while know what I'm about to say, which is it's a lot easier to re-elect an incumbent than to hold on to an open seat. And we're really good in a primary cycle at getting the circular firing squad together and beating each other up. And when that's all over and done with, we got to come together quickly and we got to win some elections. So I wanted to be here tonight in my hometown to tell y'all I am running for another term to serve again as your state Republican Party chairman. Thank you. And we can continue to win. We know what the recipe is to win. The recipe is to do a lot of the things that we did in 2024 and do more of them. We're already engaging with the legislature again on election integrity legislation. We're working on it right now, had a meeting about it yesterday. We're working on fundraising. I'm excited to announce tonight for the first time, April 1st in Atlanta, we will have Laura Trump speaking at our spring fundraiser. So I hope many of you will come join us for that. But we're going to continue to be very aggressive about fundraising because we want to be players in this process. We want to be able to make sure we get our nominees over the line. And so there's going to be a choice. There's another person running. Maybe there'll be others that run for state chairman. But I want to kind of finish my remarks to you tonight by giving you an idea of what the choice is. My vision of the Georgia Republican Party is we are here to win elections and make sure that Republicans continue to govern the state of Georgia. That is our mission. There are others who would say that our mission is to pick fights with each other, try to get more followers on social media for ourselves, and be self-promoters. That's not me. That's not why I'm here. I don't care if anybody remembers my name after the 2026 election. All I want is for us to win. That is it. It is just that simple. Because the Democrats of today, some of y'all that have been around for a while may remember people like Sam Nunn and Zell Miller. Senate Bill 1 in the state legislature passed last week. 33 Republicans voted for it, 2 Democrats voted for it. Now, what did this bill say? The bill said men shouldn't play in women's sports. Now, I think it's insane that we had to pass a law to say men can't play in women's sports. But who are the 2 Democrats that voted for that bill in the state Senate? Ed Harbison from Columbus and Freddie Powell Sims in Albany. They both joined the 33 Republicans. Now, and that's good. It's good that it was bipartisan. But what y'all know, if y'all know Ed, I served with Ed. Ed and Freddie are kind of on their way out of the Democratic Party, right? They've had their time. They're at the sort of tail end of their political careers. The people that are coming forward are people like John Ossoff, people like Raphael Warnock, people like Park Cannon and others in the legislature that are extreme left woke liberals. So that's why these elections are so important. If we allow, whether it's Stacey Abrams, whether it's Lucy McBath to become governor of Georgia, you talk about having a case of political whiplash. Think about how happy we've been about Trump and think about it in the other direction. That's what it's going to be like. So I'll just close with this. You've heard from your chairman about the convention cycle. This election will be decided for state chairman by 1,500 to 2,500 people that come to Dalton in June. So please make sure that Muskogee County has a full delegation to go to the state convention. And I understand it is a sacrifice. It costs time, it costs money. You're giving up a couple of Saturdays, a weekend to go up to Dalton. But I'm telling y'all, this election and who you elect as state chairman, and again, it's not about me, it's about the direction the party goes in. It is so important. It is so important about what kind of Georgia your children and your grandchildren are going to live in. So I just ask that you will participate in the process, that you come to Dalton, and I would be honored if you would consider voting for me to have one more term as your state chairman. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.